Hey folks, I have had an exciting first month in reefing. Lots of ups, lots of downs. Let's start off with an up. Here I got my first batch of coral fragments, and I am doing my due diligence. Right here I am preparing them all by taking them out of their packaging and putting them in this berry bowl. And I'm going to, once they're all situated in here, dip them. So I put them in the colander and then add some of this Coral RX, which is going to shock any hitchhikers, any pests or anything on that. So when I'm shaking it around like this, it's supposed to knock off these now stunned pests. I got a turkey blaster here that I'm blasting the hell out of them. And I even take a toothbrush to make sure I clean off all of the plugs and make sure there's no eggs or anything on that. I wanted to make sure this was well documented because this is going to come in important later on in this video. I did my due diligence. Like, I am making sure that every little speck and nook and cranny here is cleaned off. And here you can actually see the zoanthids. And I've got two little water containers right there to the side set up for rinsing them off so I don't get any of this Coral X now into the tank, which is exactly where we're going to head now as I put them in. These are my very first coral in the tank. I'm super pleased with this. This is my little Zoa garden. You see the prodigy kind of spazzing out a little bit. He's going to hide away. And now at the top you see I've got my first Montipora up on that mountain. And here is the prodigy spazzing out even more. I had done a water change the day before, and he kind of had this weird personality shift where he was like suddenly super nervous all of the time. And I didn't realize just how bad it was until he did that. But here are the Zoas now opening up. You may have noticed that I was wearing safety glasses during the whole process because these guys excrete the second most deadly neurotoxin. So I don't want to screw around with that. In the last video, I was unsure about why we were supposed to include these workout portions in our videos, but since the most popular reefer does this, I figured I should. Well, I figured out the answer. It's to impress chicks, or more specifically, to impress our moms, because when our mom sees this, because she's definitely going to see anything you put on YouTube, she's going to be so proud to see you're taking care of yourself. So, hi, Mom. So the very next day, I've got even more frags. I'd gotten a whole bunch off of the live sales for Tidal Gardens, and these were from the live sales for Worldwide Coral. And you get a little bit of a better impression of what I'm doing here, where I've got a light out, and I'm really trying to make sure I don't have any hitchhikers on these frags. I didn't need goggles for these, though, because none of these were especially dangerous to me. But they were very cool, and this one that I'm putting in right now is a Montipora stellata, which is a tricky coral. Like this is when I'm getting into the hard stuff. This is a stony polyp, small polyp stony coral, and it is going to be a challenge. And the one down there is a bird's nest, also a SPS coral. I'm not sure if it's going to work out there. It's supposed to need less light and less flow than the Montipora that are up on that big mountain. But I figured I give it a shot there. I got it for like 15 bucks, so it was worth the shot. I like the idea very much of having this little tree on my Zoa garden, so I wanted to give it a go there. And up next is my new favorite coral, the neon green Duncan. And this is a really cool tentacly thing that moves around in the water column. And you see there, that's the first time anything besides the prodigy here is moving. Like it's got this nice flow with the water flow, which is really fun to watch. And you see the Zoas are really opening up there. A few days later, when I woke up, I found the prodigy lying in the back of the tank on a sand bed. At first I thought he might be dead, so I paying attention. He still seems to be breathing, so I tried feeding the tank, see if that would get him active or something, and that didn't do anything. So I immediately stopped everything, put breakfast and everything else on hold. My priority was to spend an hour doing every single water quality test that I can do, and it all came back as negative, and that was infuriating, because if it was like a high ammonia or something like that, I could do something about that. I could do a massive water change or something to get whatever is bad out of the water and, you know, replace it with good water. But there was nothing wrong. So that meant I spent the whole day watching him slowly die. He didn't stop kind of fighting and struggling until about 5 p.m. that night. And that was a really, really tough day. I know when you're watching these videos, at least I know for myself when I'm watching other people's reefing videos, the fish are just part of the decoration, right? I kind of went into it with the same mindset. When I went into the fish store, I knew I wanted a firefish because it was going to be a very pretty decoration. But the moment the lady at the fish store handed me the bag with him in it, I'm looking at his eyes and I'm like, oh my God, you are adorable and now I am responsible for you and I'm going to do everything I can to take care of you. So it was devastating to not be able to take care of him when it was really, you know, something that was internalized to me. Like, this is a pet. I watch him die and not being able to do anything about it was really rough. But back on a positive note, the corals all seem to be settling in well. This is 4 days after, and you see that those polyps are just bouncing and flowing around, especially here on this stellata. The last Montipora was a Montipora digitata. This is a Montipora stellata, which I think are going to look great together because they both have like this purplish skeleton and green polyps. And here's the Duncan, just spread out, grabbing at anything that's in the water column. I love that vibrant green. And now I've got a new fish and a new coral on this day, about 3 days after that last. And here I'm dripping the fish, and here I'm dripping the coral. I'm doing all of this in the morning, like as fast as possible, so that neither die. And you see why I do the drip and dipping on the coral, because those were all hitchhikers. It's hard to film them, but they're all little critters. And in goes the fish. Is a Picasso clown, which is a particularly cool type of clown.
Water, fire, air, and dirt. Fucking magnets, how do they work?
I couldn't resist. Just look at this guy. I love the coloration on him. Like, it's just so cool. It looks kind of like a puzzle piece, like a jigsaw puzzle. And he's out exploring and looking around, and he's got this cute kind of dance to the way he moves. And unfortunately, like after just a little while of the happy dancing, he started to kind of spaz a little bit. And after my last loss, the firefish that I assumed just kind of stressed out, I'm really worried about this guy stressing out. But then he bangs himself into the glass trying to get out, and that was a bad sign. And now he seems preoccupied with his reflection. Like, that's all he seemed to be interested in, was his reflection. Now, my first instinct is that since he's been captively bred, he's spent his whole life with his brothers, right? Like, he's used to having dozens of other fish around him all the time, and now suddenly he doesn't, and he's clearly freaking out. Like, if you talk to some people about this, they'll say, no, you're anthropomorphizing. Fuck that. Look at this. This fish is freaking out. This is not me anthropomorphizing the fish. This is a lonely fish trying desperately to get at his reflection. And if you do ask these other people for advice, they're going to say things like, oh, all clownfish do this. Well, that may be so, but he is clearly not having a good time. And I'm not happy with him not having a good time. Like, this is really, really hard to watch. And I'm sorry to make you guys watch this too, but I think it's important to document this, because this is like a beautiful fish that seemed happy for about 20 minutes and then now is just completely spazzing out. I've obviously edited it down to just show the most dramatic parts of this, but this is how he's spending his first day in this tank. He's just immediately unhappy. And I am immediately unhappy for him, because I don't want to be torturing him like this. On the next day, I caught sight of a pretty rare phenomenon. Lots of corals have what's called sweeper tentacles, which they're just these huge tentacles that can come out of nowhere that they use to swipe at other nearby coral in order to claim their own territory. And in many cases, these sweepers sting in a way that's really destructive to the other coral that's on the receiving end. And I was worried about this bird's nest over here. I thought that the Zoa was somehow aware of his neighbor and was trying to desperately grab at him. So I grabbed the camera and pointed at the tank just to watch this, to see if, okay, do I have to move one of these two away from the other? And as I'm watching this, fierce zoanthid sweeper tentacle, it turns out it was just poop. 2 days after I'd gotten Shaggy, he was still not eating, and this is alarming. He's got to eat. He's still stressing out. He's looking at his reflection. He's not eating. So I put up some paper to try to get him to eat, and he did nip at some stuff, but it was obviously not enough because he died the very next day. Now, I'm not sure what got him, but I did discover that my ammonia was extremely elevated after I found his body. Now, to understand why ammonia is so important, let's take a trip over to the Science Corner to discuss the nitrogen cycle.
Science Corner, Science Corner, Science Corner with Discord.
Yes, science, bitch!
Ammonia and ammonium are the first step of the nitrogen cycle. They enter the tank through two different vectors, either from decaying food or from the fish themselves. Like we do, we need to excrete ammonia. The fish also need to excrete ammonia, but they do it through their gills. Now, if there's too much ammonia in the water, they're unable to slough it off through their gills, and they get a buildup of ammonia in their bodies and they die. Now, it's a very toxic substance. Ammonia is bad for everybody. But ammonium isn't so bad. And unfortunately, the pH in the tank is causing the ammonia and the ammonium to constantly swap back and forth, and it can be really rapid. But ammonium is safe. Ammonia is the bad stuff. Now, fortunately, there are bacteria that we cultivate that will eat the ammonia and the ammonium and turn that into nitrite. And at the nitrite stage, it's less toxic, but it's still problematic. If you get too much of it, it's bad, especially in fresh water. It's not so bad in salt water, but you don't want a lot of this. And there are even more bacteria that will eat that and turn that into nitrate. Now, the nitrate is where it's no longer considered toxic. Now, you might be more familiar with nitrates as the stuff that makes hot dogs taste good. Nitrates. Now, that still ain't good for you, but it's not toxic, and same is true for the fish and the corals. As long as you don't have too much, you're probably good, but a little too much will become irritating for everybody. So you want to keep that under control. And you've got even more bacteria that will gobble this up. These are the anaerobic bacteria that are way deep within the sand bed and rock structure that eat the nitrate and turn that into nitrous oxide. Nitrous is a gas, so it just bubbles right out of the tank.
Science Corner, Science Corner, Science Corner with Discord.
Have at it, bitches, because I love hot dogs.
One big advantage to having such a tiny tank is this is my water change, which is kind of a grandiose term for just dunking an orange juice container in the water. But this is all it takes to do a 5% water change. I dunk it in, grab a whole bunch of water with that. And while I'm doing this, I've got some salt water that's already mixed up. So I can just pull that out. Make sure I don't drip salt water all over any of my expensive musical gear. I've got towels everywhere. I also don't want to get it on my carpet. And well, that's it. That's a half-gallon container. So that's 5% of my water volume. And I just pour in... I don't mix up that whole bucket. I've got markings to let me know exactly how much half gallon is. I gently pour it in so that I don't disturb any of the sand or zoanthids, which are directly underneath that. But as you see, they're not getting moved around, so I'm doing a pretty good job of slowly pouring it in. In fact, this is the most time-consuming part of this whole process, is just making sure I'm doing this part slow. Whereas with the larger tanks, you hear about these guys that have to take these massive brute trash cans, and they use that for their mixing and salt water changes. I can't even begin to imagine where I would stick one in my house to do any large water changes like this. For me, this tiny little 2-gallon bucket and the orange juice container are sufficient. And I'm done. Whole process takes maybe 10 minutes. I mean, I don't really babysit the salt water as it's being mixed. So when I was trying to talk myself out of getting into this hobby, because it's an expensive hobby that is going to be heartbreaking, I was trying really hard to talk myself out of it. And when I was doing that, I was saying, do you really want to spend all this money just to have something that you're going to have to clean every day? And that was a pretty convincing argument for the most part. But as you see, it did not win out. And I'm glad that it didn't, because I actually find this process of cleaning the glass every day to be really contemplative. I do it every day, like at the end of the day, when, I'm kind of worn out, maybe I've done my working out or whatever, and I'll go and do this, and it's just really relaxing to scrape the glass, and I'll take a little squeegee and make sure I clean off any salt creep or any water that's dripped along the side. And just the whole process of going through and making sure that the glass is clean is very zen. And here we are a little over a week after the loss of Shaggy 2 Dope, and my ammonia is now under control, and I was advised that this was a good time to get some new fish in the tank to help with the whole nitrogen denitrifying cycle. So I took their advice, and I've got my Senai, I've got ammo lock, I'm just absolutely ready for whatever is going to come. And I got a pair of clownfish this time because, oh my God, I do not want to watch a fish freaking out in this tank anymore. So it might seem crazy that I threw in 2 fish after I was having problems keeping 1 fish alive, but now I'm like really confident in my ability to manage the ammonia if it was the ammonia that took out the last one. So here they are. They're relying on the buddy system. Like, that's a big part of why I thought 2 fish was going to work, and it seems to be the case. As you see, one of them will kind of stray off from the other and kind of explore things, and then they come back, and they'll stray off a little bit, and after a little while, they keep coming back to each other, and the little dance of them being brave enough to go and explore a little bit and then come running back to each other for safety is really cute to watch. And the 2 of them were just immediately way calmer than Shaggy ever was. Like, he had that 20-minute happy period followed by just freaking out for 4 days, whereas these guys were calm and cool and collected immediately. Like, this is immediately after they've been put in, and they're not like spazzing out or acting weird. Everything seems to be going according to plan. And unlike Shaggy, these guys were eating like immediately. They were eating in the shop. They ate dinner when they came home. They ate breakfast here, and I was so relieved. And as you see, they're getting more adventurous. They're getting really far from each other before running back to the buddy system. They just seem so much calmer than Shaggy ever did. So I'm cautiously optimistic at this point. They seem to be happy, and I was testing to see how they would react to this weirdo showing up and grinning wildly at them. You see, there was some curiosity before running back to the buddy, and the safety in numbers seems to keep them calm, so that kept me calm. I was very relieved at this point. And while we were at the fish store, we also picked up a crab, or I should say my husband did. He saw this guy blew a raspberry at him, and my husband fell in love, so we grabbed him. Did you know crabs can climb? So 2 days in with the fish, and I noticed a slight increase in the ammonia over that time. I'm paying really close attention to this. Now that I've spent the money on the Senai, I am paying really close attention to this. And as it's creeping up, it's hitting 0.018, which is bad, but not terrible. And then it hits 0.02, which is definitely getting into the alarming area. And that's when I decided, okay, I'm going to pull the emergency lever here and use the ammo lock that's supposed to bind up the harmful ammonia and turn it into just pure ammonium. And so, okay, we're ready for this. So I dosed the recommended 5 milliliters per 10 gallons. So day 42 comes up, and I'm happy, fish are happy, corals are happy, everybody's happy. And I've got a new batch of corals in from Tidal Gardens. I didn't even intend to buy anything on this sale, but it was another live sale with just amazing deals on corals. So there were more corals I wanted, so I grabbed them. And the two I'm putting in right now are a couple of really rare Goniopora. One of them is a short pink one, and the other is an even shorter orange one. This orange one is particularly unique. It's an encrusting Goniopora, so it's not like the flower pot that you may be familiar with. A chief criticism among reefers, and especially YouTube reefers, is that they don't show you when they fuck up. And I promise you, I will show you when I do. And that's exactly what I'm doing right now. I am breaking the third coral, which is a Ultra Leptoceras. So I'm trying to scrape it off the frag plug, but it doesn't want to come off. So it actually breaks in half. So error number one, breaking the fucking Lepto, which typically retails for about $100. Now, I'm going to try to save the frag that broke off, but here's the one that's still on the plug, and I'm making a real mess with the super glue, and it's just not going to stick to the wall with me trying to pull off that bit. So I give up on that, re-glue it, and error number 3 is definitely not leaving it the hell alone, because it probably should have just stayed right there. Like if I just left it right there, that'd have been fine. But I didn't do that. So now I tried to get that bit of glue that you can see on the back off, but I couldn't. So now I'm like, okay, I'll put the small fragment on that to cover that up. And I'm holding it here, holding it in place. This is all sped up, but it still takes a while to harden. And I put the frag upside down so that it's a plating, so that the encrusting plate part is actually going to cover the light. So I had to take it off, re-glue it, and I dropped the fucking thing. And I couldn't believe just how badly I was screwing this up, but I was glad I had it on camera so I can show you that I'm being honest with this. Like when I screw up, you're going to see it. And all right, pull it out. Third time now gluing this little fragment that had been broken off. I'm really glad I was using iodine in this dip. So here I finally have it. It's correctly positioned, but there's a little bit of the super glue is down on top of the frag. And I'm like, okay, you know what? I need to leave this alone. I leave it alone now. And this part, I'm not actually screwing up. I'm trying to fit it for, I'm using epoxy to hold the plug on rather than the super glue, because I'm really sick of the super glue. And as you see, I actually bumped the one that was super glued, but it's still managed to hold. So, all right, that's the end of that. Now, you may have noticed while all of that was going on that the clowns were kind of freaking out. And I didn't notice until they were down here in the corner of the tank. And I'm looking at them like, what's going on, guys? You're worrying me here. Now, when you look online about any kind of clown issue, most people just say that it's clowns being clowns. But I'm getting a little worried, so as I'm looking at this and I'm filming this, I actually ask him, what the hell are you two doing? And grouped up and huddled, and then they did this kind of runway walk thing. Or it gave me a good opportunity to film their sides to see that they don't have any kind of infection. You know, there's no white spots or any kind of weirdness going on with their gills or fins. And this kind of looked like playful behavior, so I wrote it off as, you know, it's clowns being clowns. And these particular clowns were eating a lot, so that's usually the biggest indicator of health. So I tried not to freak out. And here in the background, you can see the pink Goniopora. And in the foreground is one of the zoanthids. And over here are the other zoanthids. I had some kind of infection or something that was bothering them, and I gave them an iodine dip. And this is actually a sign of improvement. Like the two that you're seeing here in the front were finally opening up. Before they were just completely closed up. The one in the back is a total write-off. I'm leaving it in there because 2 of the heads look like they might recover, but they ultimately did not. I'm not sure what the infection was, but an iodine dip was the cure. So thank you very much to Doctor of Welsh Magic for that recommendation. They're doing so much better now, and I really want to save this Zoa Garden green ones that I showed you first. Had no signs of any problems at all. And here's now both colonies of Duncans. The one in the back is supposed to be blue, Like it's on Live Aquarius site, it says it's supposed to be purple and blue, but that looks like pink and green to me. I'm happy with it, and I kind of, I asked, did you guys maybe send me the wrong one? And they gave me a $30 refund, but I didn't want the $30. That's why I gave them the $30. I wanted a purple Duncan. And here are the candy canes. Really love the vibrant green, but you can't really see it too well on video. It looks great in person. I'm really happy with it. And this bird nest that I had placed on the Zoogarden clearly did not like where it was placed. I had initially thought that it was getting too much light because the first thing it did was turn brown, and that a lot of people say, well, if the bird nest is turning brown, it's getting too much light. Well, it was probably not getting enough flow down there, but I figured that out too late. Here, this Monopora is not doing as well as it used to be doing. You recall that it used to have all of the polyps fully extended like this. You know, this was what it was looking like 2 days after it had been in the tank, and now it's looking like this. It's still extending a little bit. Like if I look at it at night, those little green bits are gone. But just below that, like 2 or 3 inches below that, is the Monopora stellata, which is loving life. Like, look at those puffy polyps all the way out to the tip. Really, really glad that I got a variety of corals so that when I do have ones that are just randomly not happy, I have others that are still. And speaking of happy, this Duncan is loving life. Like, that's some really nice extension there from the definitely not purple Duncan. And it is really just like so fluffy and fun to watch bouncing around in the water like that. And behind it is the encrusting Goniopora, which kind of looks like a Monopora, which is why it's on the base of Mount Monty. That's what I've named that whole rock section. And it looks so cool to see all these little polyps. Like you can see them waving just a little bit in the video. It's really cool to watch it in real life because it's like this. It's almost furry, but it's not really furry. It's more like an alien sort of furry. It looks great. I'm super happy. I can't wait to see this encrust all over the bottom of the rock. And during the actual live sale, there was some confusion for whether or not this is a Monopora or a Goniopora, because it's an encrusting. It's super weird. It kind of looks like Monty's, but now that I have it, I'm certain that it is not a Monopora because of the way the polyps retract. It doesn't fully retract. It just kind of curls into buds. And here you can see me feeding the Duncans. They are voracious eaters, and it's really fun to feed them. And you can also see below that neon green here is starting to sprout another head. It's actually sprouting 5 heads all around the base, but this is the largest of the new heads in the colony that you can see. Today, the tentacles are getting longer and longer, and they're actually bouncing around in the waves themselves. And you'll also notice that while this is going on, the clowns seem to be back to normal. This is only about 5 minutes after they were huddled in that corner and acting weird. They seem to be completely normal now, running around trying to eat, even though I had just fed them an hour ago. They're trying to eat whatever the Duncan didn't grab. And here you can see the Duncan grabbing food that's kind of left floating around the column. You see the tentacles wrapping around that one piece that it's going to slowly, this is all at real speed, I think. Yeah, it's real time. He's slowly bringing that up. You can see the little eyes on that. I think it was a mysis that he's dragging inexorably towards his mouth. And while I'm filming this, it occurs to me that I've made it. Like, everything looks so good in the tank right now. I got fish, I got coral, everything is alive and happy, and I'm just so pleased with all of the effort that it's taken to get to this point. And the very next day, I wake up wondering where my clowns are and what my crab is eating. I'm gonna let myself speak for myself here.
God fucking damn it, man.
This was really hard to see at the time, because I went from that super high to this super low, and I'm just completely baffled. Just really completely baffled of what killed him. The crab didn't kill him. The crab is just cleaning up the mess. And the other one is stuck up on the power head. It's being sucked towards it because he was just floating dead. So both of them were wiped out last night, and I have no idea why.
God damn it. Oh,
really thought these two were going to do okay.
They were doing great. They were eating like fucking champs yesterday. What the fuck? So I'm like super pissed at this point. This is 4 fish that have died in a month. I looked at the Senai readings and it says that my ammonia at the time is like 0.022, which really should not be lethal for saltwater fish. It's not good by any means, but it's only like alarming. I did a post-mortem for all of the fish that died, and you see that there are no signs of ick, which would be white spots, or velvet, which would be similar white spots. There's no weird redness anywhere. There's no fin rot or any of the other diseases. Eyes are clear. There's just no parasitic or infectious explanation for them both dying last night, and I'm baffled. So when we look at the Senai, at the time that they died, it was at 0.22. And now I remove them, and my ammonia continues to climb. Like, this is the day after, and it's climbing all the way up to 0.088, which is remarkable. Like, I'm thinking to myself, man, I've got to have like another thing dying and decaying in here. Like, is one of my snails missing? So I'm doing a head count, and I couldn't find one of the Nacerius, and I assumed for a while there that that must be it. That the Nacerius died and is rotting in there, and that's throwing everything out of balance. So I got a special red flashlight to look into the tank at night, and I was able to do a full head count. The missing Nacerius was in there, so literally all of my snails are accounted for. There is nothing randomly decaying or dying in there. My pH is reasonable. My NH4, the ammonium, is kind of just doing weird stuff. But you see that the pH stays between 7.98 and 7.8 something. So it's totally within an acceptable range. And the next day, it's finally starting to come down, but it took it a while, and it only came down to 0.50. And you'll notice while the ammonia is coming down, the ammonium is going way up. And at this point, I'm beginning to blame that fucking ammo lock. That it didn't actually solve any of my problems, and has just made the water chemistry between the free ammonia and the ammonium completely screwed up. And finally, several days later now, the ammonia has come down to 0.22, but it took it a really long time, and the whole time that this is going on, the ammonium is just way up there. Like the ammonium hasn't come down at all, while the ammonia has. It's super weird. Like, this should not happen. There's no reason, like, from everything that I've read, this should not happen. But that's what the readings are showing me. I don't even know what the hell's going on. I'm consulting with a lot of different people online, trying to get to the bottom. It's like, why am I killing all these fish? So that's where I'm at right now. I am watching the ammonia decline at a really slow pace. I tried consulting with a lot of different people across the community, trying to get any sort of advice about what's going on here. And the prevailing opinion is that there's just something really screwed up with my cycle. The whole process of culturing beneficial bacteria is just screwed up. I have my own personal suspicions that I might have screwed up when I wasn't feeding anything into the tank during that week between the Prodigy and Shaggy Two-Dope. So during that period, there was nothing feeding the bacteria that eat the ammonia. So when I started adding more fish in, it might have been trying as best as it could to cope with that, but there was too much fish and food ammonia that it couldn't handle it. So the plan here is that I'm going to go 6 weeks without any fish, and now I'm trying to redose in the beneficial bacteria. I'm using Sea Chem Stability's program instead of the Red Sea program because I tried using the Red Sea stuff and it didn't seem to be having any noticeable impact on my ammonia readings. So now with the Sea Chem, it is coming down little by little, and I'm going to be patient with this. I'm going to let it just have 6 weeks where I'm just feeding the tank and the Duncans and everything without any fish, adding even more ammonia in here, so that hopefully in about 6 weeks' time, the beneficial bacteria will be cultivated. And the reason I'm giving it 6 weeks is a very specific deadline. The possibility exists that it could be some sort of a parasite, something that eats on fish and needs fish in order to keep propagating itself. Diseases like ick and marine velvet are like this. Now, I'm pretty sure that it's not one of those, but it is possible that it's one of those, and if I wait 6 weeks, that means that there won't be a fish for the larvae that the ick eject to eat. And without any fish hosting the parasites, there's no life cycle for those parasites at all, so they just kind of die out without a host. So 6 weeks is the standard there for, okay, now there's a long stretch of time, no fish, then any kind of parasite should die out. Another reason I'm going for 6 weeks is, while I was looking for any kind of advice as to what was going on here, one person chimed in to say that he's using the same exact rock I'm using in a similarly sized tank and had similar difficulties when he was adding, I think he lost like 4 clowns over the course of a couple of months, where he's like, well, I can't figure out why my clowns are dying. I've done all the things that I was supposed to be doing. What's going on? And he finally just left the tank alone, feeding the coral, and let it sit for a while. And then when he was like, okay, you know, it's been a while. I think he waited a month or something like that. He finally had some fish, and the fish were great. So he had gotten over whatever that hump was. And I think that what he was experiencing was the fact that this rock is particularly dense. So it's not as porous as a lot of the other rocks that are used in reefing, and in such a small water volume, we need to give the bacteria every opportunity to populate as best it can with what it's got to work with, and it tries to populate onto the rock. And I've also got a whole bunch of other materials in the back and in the sand that are designed for those bacteria to thrive. So I'm going to follow his example and wait until the tank is about 2.5 to 3 months old. So I'm giving it 6 weeks right now of just letting the bacteria do their thing, and hopefully I will have no more mysterious death of fish. Next month's probably going to be a lot shorter, but I do have plans for things with the corals, and we'll do some more science. Take it easy, folks.